Hello guys, thanks for joining this seminar. I'm Kudrix and I'm going to talk about a topic that's very dear to my heart and probably to most of you, which is the business most of us are in, digitalization. So we are focusing on a very contemporary topic, which we are involved since many years probably now. So I'm proposing a differentiation of digital pioneers, natives, and masters. And if all of you don't know what I'm talking about, I hope to give you some more clarity within the next 30 minutes. And I'm eager to discuss this topic with you because I'm on a journey to put all this into a series of articles, and I'm valuing your feedback that you are able to give at the end of the presentation. So what are we up to? So we look at first, what's digitalization? What's the term? What's the meaning behind it? And then we take a look in the generation topic of digital pioneers and digital natives. And always, if you see these two guys here, these are the pioneers, these are the natives. And we are trying to work out a definition, and I'm totally biased here for these two types of generations. Try to find out what their key characteristics and traits are, and in which environmental setting these guys grew up, which brought them to obtain skills based on certain brands that they associated with. And last but not least, what does digitalization expect from them to deliver in their daily work or real-life environments? Then we will move on to proposing a framework for digital masters. So these are the guys that will basically live in a fully digitalized world. And what are their key challenges in this world? And what could such a world look like? And is there some way how we can tweak education to make them prevail in such an environment? Because I think some stuff is education-wise currently amiss, so that we should shape this into a direction which makes these guys fit for the future. I would like to discuss this with you, as I already mentioned, and I, as I said, would like to foster a discussion on bringing this into an article series. Okay, let's kick in. Digitalization is a currently omnipresent term, which is, well, basically going into the understanding of digital change in a world that we all live in. But for some it's difficult, for some it's easy, for some it's something that is necessary to survive. And this already started in basically back in the 80s when computers became to enter households and homes. And everyone who's considered digital native today is taking all this for granted. This is far from over yet. So we are still in the digitalization challenge and movement, and some stuff will basically come which we cannot foresee yet. I've also taken some public definitions. So some define digitalization differently because digitalization is the process of making a digital copy of something, as opposed to digitalization, which is more a process of transforming things, which leads us into a complete societal change, a digital transformation of every business and everything that we live in. These are some definitions I've brought to you, so you can look at them later if you would like on the presentation. So, moving on, what are digital pioneers and natives? I will try to bring up my own definition of them. As stated earlier, I'm totally biased. As you probably can see, I'm counting myself more on the digital pioneer side. And try to identify what are key things that make them tick and what are the key characteristics of these folks. So first, my digital pioneers definition is these are the originators of digital awakening. So the guys who made it all happen and planted the seeds of digitalization, started off with the 8-bit world, moved on later into the 16-bit world. And sometimes they are even referred to as the Generation C64 based on the Commodore C64 that most of us used at the time. Fundamental to this definition is this was at a time where computers were not everywhere. So a computer was basically an installation that you had in your office or in your home, or was something that was shielded away from the public in hidden data centers where no one could really see the technology behind it. And this was something that could be understood by individuals who dived into it, and they were able to digest it all and understand it. And this is something that we have overcome over time, and we will see what I mean with this later. So actually, I have tried to picture some terms that I associate with digital pioneers. So first of all, they are highly involved. They are diving into the things, they want to understand it, they want to go to the core of it, and they are excited about it. They are sometimes reckless because they crack stuff, but they are limitless, they have creativity, they are hackers, they are sometimes called the elite, and you have absolute immersion into the world of digital, well, topics. So this is kind of the working definition for those guys. Moving on to the digital natives. I particularly try to avoid this millennial, Gen Z, digital immigrants divide because I want to be more or less black and white in that area. So digital natives, in my view, are the guys who are benefiting from the network world that we nowadays live in. And they never experienced a time when there were no computers around. So basically, today, computers are everywhere. So a fridge is something that makes stuff cold, a microwave is something that makes stuff hot. They are all computers, and the computer that is driving us around is a car. So these digital natives take that all for granted and try to simplify, and no one can blame them for it, to put every problem into an app that solves it. So they do this without thinking about it, what's behind it. So obviously there's people in this age generation who dive into the topics as well as most of the pioneers do, but the general theme is these guys take that for granted, and they sometimes lack basic understanding of how that IT stuff works. Let's see if that is something that you share or something that is heavily debated. I've tried to put in some comments for these guys. They are good at multitasking, at least they claim it. They are easily experimenting stuff. They simplify stuff, which makes it manageable. They are travelers, they are integrators, they don't, they chime in easily in new situations. They are sometimes really careless when it comes to stuff like data protection. And they are obviously good at swiping left and right on a smartphone. I would like to give you some more context on the digital pioneers because I have spent some thought on this, and I have tried to define what I call the Commodore sweet spot age group. And don't be shocked by this table, I will explain it a little bit more. I've tried to take the age groups, which are the birth years on the left-hand side of the table, and try to define a corridor of age which resonated well with this age group. So let's see if we take a look here. We have these guys from 66 to 76 and defined age corridor of 8 to 18 years. And if we then draw it in the horizontal line and take a look when stuff like Commodore 64 and Amiga were around, you see that it probably became biggest starting in 84 and go all the way to about 93, 94 when Commodore went bankrupt. And if you take a look at this age segment here, under my premise that people who are between 18 and 8, when the stuff started to roll, you see that we have this age group here. And you can see that this corridor of people who were between 11 and 15 years old when things started to roll with Commodore are, from my point of view, the most productive in that scene, in that area. So for example, I'm a year 76, so I was basically 8 when that time started, and I consider myself to have been too young to be most productive in that field. So my theory is that people who are today between 46 and 50 years old are the most productive in that area and have taken the greatest benefit of it and deserve the definition of digital pioneers most. So I'm really happy to hear your thoughts on that later, so we can come back to it later. So, what were the environments and tech brands that influenced which skills you wanted to pick in the end? So I've taken the liberty to take some personal pictures. So from that time, that's 93. It's a little bit too late probably, but this was a time when you still hung out with friends at the pool, had a barbecue, had a few drinks, without having technology all around you all the time. So at that time, you just had a stereo somewhere to have some music, but that was it from a technology perspective. And obviously the video camera that was taking the pictures, but let's forget that for a second. The brands people in that generation associated most, obviously Commodore, as I stated before, but these are still a lot of brands which are not around anymore. If you take a look, if we see what's around still is Apple, IBM, and Yamaha, obviously. Sony is big, but all the rest, no one is talking a lot about anymore. So if you take a look at this IVA archive stuff, that's video recorders, tape recorders, and stuff like that. So these are brands which are probably more or less lost. And how did you obtain skills associated with this stuff? Basically by trying it out yourself, because there was no one who could explain it to you. You try it out yourself, and you program, and you get to know the stuff, and you build your own systems, and you may be familiar with something that was around at that time, which was called CompuCamp. So it were camps like holiday camps where you could send your children, and I was lucky enough to have been sent to these places a couple of times. So this is stuff that's helped you to understand technology and the things that you have associated yourself with. Now for the natives, as I said, technology all around, big screens, technology everywhere, and you dive in, and something that is slowly moving into our society and no one is talking enough about it, surveillance everywhere. So we have basically ubiquitous surveillance of everything, which comes with the technology and the possibilities of technology, and no one is really caring enough from my point of view about this. Brands are more or less ambiguous. Maybe Apple and Huawei and Samsung are big scale things. However, you have a multitude of brands. I've just listed the most prominent ones, and it's quite difficult to obtain an understanding of every single technology that's behind it. Which brings us to how you obtain new skills. Yeah, you go on the internet and search for it, and then you find a tutorial or a video or whatever, and you go to conferences or school or university to be taught about it. But the involvement from my point of view is a little bit less. So if you go for an IT study program today, chances are you will learn something, but not enough to be really prevailing in that world. So now I promised you to look into Digitalisation Challenge, because this is more or less a recap of history. What we see today from a digitalization perspective is a multitude of different technologies that you have to be familiar with, or topics you have to relate with when you are in that domain. So I've tried to picture some of the most dominant industries like banking, automotive, manufacturing, transportation, healthcare, public services. There's many more. And if you have to be familiar with all that stuff, robo-advisors in banking, robotics in manufacturing, industrial IoT, autonomous driving in the automotive sector, transportation, RFID technology everywhere, or even NFC, electronic health card in healthcare, public services, having to take care about next generation access, 5G stuff, and so on. So you see, this is just a more or less random but probably prominent pick of stuff that you have to be familiar with if you're in that domain. And if you look beyond it, you have a lot of cross-functional topics you have to be familiar with as well. So you have to take care of cybersecurity, identity and access management, regulatory compliance, especially in IT questions, GDPR, for example, Everyone talks about cloud computing. Now there's more about edge computing, so you have to understand what that is. You have to understand what is a data-centric enterprise and what's big data. You have to understand what social media marketing is. So you have to be basically a generalist of all the terms, so how can you, for one technology, choose and focus in and understand it all? So you have to be a generalist. So, digital masters. Is this the world they were supposed to live in? Is this where we are coming from? I've taken the liberty to take the pictures from the 2 past revisions. So we have this Evilbot theme, and we have the totalitarian state overview in the other theme. So is this the world we project our digital masters, probably our kids, to grow up in? I don't know. But chances are that we will see at least some of this stuff happen. And we have to make sure that our digital masters are able to run through it all. So I would like to take you to the definition or idea that I have, and in which I want to get involved in more, is what can we do to make them fit to survive this, well, dystopian concept or idea, and maybe enable them to not make that all reality. So I suggest an education model which starts with fundamentals for everyone, which are, you have to ensure that everyone, not only those guys who are involved in IT and want to spend their careers in it, are competent in media and content. And I think some of us take it for granted that everyone reflects about stuff that he or she reads in internet or hears about. But we have seen manipulation of media driving decisions of millions of people in ways that were suggested by whoever was behind it. And this is my pledge for everyone, to be really cautious about this media and content competence, how I call it. So this has to be something that has to be built in from kindergarten on, or even earlier, that you have to be reflective about things that you hear and not believe anything that comes to your ears. I've put some references which you can look into if you like. So the guy who was reporting Spiegel mining at the 33rd edition of the Chaos Computer Communication Congress, he was looking into articles from Spiegel over a month and collecting the data and looking into where you could comment, where you could not comment, how articles were changed over time. So in fact, a kind of manipulation of the content over time based on heuristics that came from there. Interesting thing, you should watch it it's available on YouTube probably. And if you have taken a look at the World Happiness Report, they say that social media makes us all depressive. Who is surprised by that? So if you have social media accounts, you should use them responsibly, and obviously this is maybe common sense for all of us, but yeah. For fundamental tech competence, I think that people nowadays don't learn enough in their early lives about technology. How can you go through life and not know at least basic things about technology? I mean, it was called electronic data processing once upon a time. And it's still electronic data processing. It's just more technology that we apply to it and use to process data. And it's not so difficult at all to understand what that means. And you can use analogies of daily life to make it more digestible for people who are not into IT. And you can at least use easy IT to train people. So this is something that my strong support is everyone needs to go through this, and this is totally not happening today in our education. So now let's get a bit more specific. Children, guys at school, people at university, and professionals at work, suggesting the age. Let's start with the smallest. I suggest that we expose them to technology early, but give them only responsible access. So if you go through Frankfurt maybe, and you see people with their children, if they want to have quiet time, they give them the smartphone and let them go with it and don't control it. So this is irresponsible access. So I'm talking about controlled access. And if you see that the children are interested in it, support that they go to programming 101 sessions, that they can get experience with it. For school, this is something where I think the most potential is lost today, is that in school situations today, the kids know more than the teachers, or supposedly know more than the teachers. And this is a totally separate world from what we see in their private lives. So if you go to school today, you are set back 30 to 40 years because technology is not there. And how can people be trained in something that surrounds them everywhere if they don't get exposed to it early in school? And they should learn at least common software tools that everyone needs in their daily lives already in school. This is not happening today. University, I have a whole write-up on the idea behind that, because this is something I want to spend more energy and time in going forward. To shape a study program that helps you to go in a project-oriented way of learning things. What do I mean with that? You propose an idea to the steering committee of the university of a topic you want to develop from an IT perspective and want to build end-to-end. And the idea behind this is that you understand this technology from end to end. So you process data, you use it on a machine, you use it maybe on a server. It's a web-based application. So my idea is that everyone who is in such a program understands every piece of technology that's involved to produce that solution. And this is not there today. I know of one university in Berlin who is going in that direction a little bit, but I think this is something where you can get real-life experience with technology development situations, which you don't get in universities today. Last but not least, I propose that obviously lifelong learning should prevail for everyone who is still in the job, but also allow that people who are in totally different domains can take the chance to dive into IT domains at a later point in time if they think that's valid for their career path. And also, I think the guys who do this are in Sweden. They allow people like a leave time from their daily job to start a business venture. And if they are not successful, they can come back to their jobs. How great an idea is that? So I think all this adds up to making people more savvy to live in such a digitalized world. And let's hope that we enable our digital masters to walk through their lives with all that in the back of their heads. This is basically the content I wanted to present to you. And I'm now looking forward to have a discussion on that and dive into some of the topics that you may want. And I'm eager to do stuff with that. Yeah? It's just not that I've put out this presentation. I said I will write an article series. I'm still thinking where to publish them, so ideas welcome. And obviously I need feedback to make this work. I had a little bit of feedback with other people already, and I said, well, there's people in technology that, or there's people using technology, they don't need to understand how that all works. Because there's just too much of it, how can anyone understand it all? So just forget about it. So I had some controversy already, but as a friend said, maybe I'm preaching to the choir here. Maybe it's that you all support me, but let's open the round, and I'm looking forward to hear your feedback. Frank.
Applause now? Or no, let's
whatever.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Andre, thank you. I was born in '77, just so that you can put into context what I'm contributing. Could you go back to the slide beforehand, because you enumerated a lot of things?
This one?
No, the one with the right, this one.
Yeah.
Just my 50 cents on this. I mean, as we are at a pure demo scene event, and you have hundreds, probably by now more like 1,000 people who have evolved, like have for one reason or another, come out of this circle of like technical incompetence, and we've somehow, as kids, or at some point, grabbed the opportunity that we actually didn't really have at the time, or maybe that we had at the time. And it's a question of whether kids now have the same opportunity. But I would suggest that there are two key points where you could start to. I mean, all of this is awesome. I mean, if we could have all that,
thank you.
It would be great. Obviously, then the only hurdle that you would have is ignorance, or people just like lack of interest or something. But what I'm saying is, when we grow up, we grasp one opportunity or another. Like maybe it's Commodore C64 to program BASIC. Or anything else. Like for me, it was making computer music. So there was something, we saw it somehow, and we did it. Now, all this costs money, obviously. So my suggestions would be, we have two points where we can get a lever to get as much going as possible. One would be, how do you reach kids from, especially not so affluent families, from, let's say, socially difficult backgrounds, who might be good at something but have no idea that it's there? How do you do that? And then the second one would be, let's come back to the whole hen and egg problem. Like you said, of course it would be great to have people at schools, at universities, at all sorts of places teach kids about something. But yeah, as you say, most kids at school are better at the IT stuff that the teachers could even theoretically teach about. So how do you suggest you approach the staff? How do you get the right people in place to be even at least able to explain basic concepts of, let's say, programming, project-oriented or object-oriented programming, or something like that?
That's a very valid question. Obviously, this all costs money, right? So I think the teachers in the situations are currently not up to the task. So, full stop. How do we make it work? Starting from the kindergarten age, you can basically do this programming 101 stuff. So I know that there are initiatives, if you broadcast them, have the chance to broadcast them to parents, and tell them, look, there's something you can send your kid to for an afternoon or a day. And then they eagerly absorb it. And even if it costs some money, they will send their kids. I know that works because I have some experience in that area. For school, it's a different scenario. Obviously, you have the chance to reach a lot of people in one point, in one consolidated environment in this age period. The teachers can, in fact, use money that is set aside for backup teachers to hire people to train classes. I know that it works because I've met 2 months back a small company in the Rhine-Main area, and these guys were doing nothing else. And they live from the money that the schools already have for backup teachers. And this is successful. So these are all very good, tiny starting points. And if we could get the political audiences to, join us in that discussion or in that ideas or mindset, then I think there is potential for it. But in general, there's obviously much too less money spent in schools for stuff like that.
Hi. So my question would be, I think that this whole idea is great, and of course you're preaching to the choir, as you said. I mean, we are in the demo scene here. Everyone is a sort of a thinker outside of the box. And the problem is that the world is driven by, unfortunately, people, a really few handful of people who want to get everything in order to make money. And this is how the commercials work, this is how the TV works, this is how the media works, the schools work even, and you teach people by the books. The challenge would be, how do you reach that handful of top people and sort of convince them to change the system, because that's actually against their values. The values is make everything mainstream in order to drive people to pay more money. That's how it works. And
Yeah.
we're trying to change the way of thinking, and I think that would be a really difficult challenge.
Yeah. Well, at least I'm trying to do my part in formulating it all and giving it a framework to even explain it. And this is a starting point. And trust me, I will continue my work on this. So if you have any ideas how we can make it work better and have contacts we can leverage, then let me know. And I'm happy to provide any support that I can give on that. And obviously also appreciate your support. And I totally see your point back there. The thing is that this is a paradigm shift, right? So we will not have this in 3 years if we now decide that's a good idea, if everyone decides it, because this is change. And the situation is, if we don't start it at all, then we will not make it work. And then we will end up with a mess of people who are, well, just absorbing everything and living through their daily lives without considering what they could do with it and what they can trust and what not.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Weasel from Padua. My age is born age is 71, and I would like to focus on another aspect of your seminar, because you told about the children these days, the new age, the current age, who are experiencing all the technology daily around everyone. And the thing is, it's a very interesting aspect, because I thought about that myself during the last years because of my own daughter, which is 4 years now. And when I look at her, how she's experiencing technology these days, it's a totally different way than we all experienced in our early ages. And this is very interesting, because I'm totally on your point that even children should start with easy learning with old computers like C64, which is explainable, which is, you can learn it. It's not that complicated like any other technology these days.
Not layers over
right.
layers over layers.
It's not too complex.
Yeah.
And the basics of how to program, how it works, how digital machines are designed, is getting totally lost today. And
True.
That's also a problem, I think, for today's generation. But what I heard when I discussed this point with other colleagues or people or younger ages is that they don't really care, because it's just working on the one side, and many people think that they don't need to understand how programming works, because they can drag and drop any icons or using a graphical user interface and whatever, and they don't need to know how it's done, because it's just there. And I think that the actual today's generation is experiencing it in a different way than we had the chance to grow up with it. I'm not sure if it's really necessary for today's children to really start at what is a bit or what is a byte. If I look at it objectively, So maybe there are two ways to look at it on a older generation perspective and a newer generation perspective to get people interested in how things work. Maybe it's not that really important to start at the first byte, you know?
Yeah, I think there's really valid aspects to that. So if they have the chance to at least preserve that knowledge somehow, I think we are okay. But as you rightfully said, people today are not even able to do that stuff that happened 30, 40 years back anymore, because the skills are just not there anymore. Because early chip designers draw their chips on a sketchboard, like an architect, a house. And this know-how is lost. And I think we are good if we have a chance to preserve this somehow, that it can be reproduced. I think we are okay. And the other aspect that you mentioned, that we don't have a way of grasping how children that grow up today understand and experience the world full of technology. This is a totally new era in the world, that people just grow up and talk to the Amazon Echo from childhood days on, because they have just not known it otherwise. So this is something that we have to see how that goes, because no one can really project how it goes. I just put that study there with if you use social media heavily, you will probably get depressed. So maybe that's a thing that helps to understand the consequences, but we don't know. And I totally see that point, that we have to really look into how people and children absorb this now going forward. And you have first-hand experience with your daughter.
Thanks. You say you've been involved with kids programs and things like that. Would you have a narrative, an example, like a ideally shockingly great, surprising example of a kid that used to be able to do something after a class like that it wasn't able to do before? Something that you could, something that, I don't know, you maybe tell all sorts of people about how shockingly great, I might be setting the bar really high here, but like something that you tell the people, like, look, this kid can now do this and this and that, and the kid didn't even know it existed before the camp. Is there something that you...
Yeah, well, I think our understanding is always that they probably are not able to cope with this complex stuff in programming languages or whatever. The opposite is true. So kids are able to pick up complex things and commands and stuff really, really good. So they are able to understand the algorithms and complexity behind it, because maybe they think differently than we all do. So I think even if they not see the greatest stuff coming out of that from one afternoon session, it's a good starting point to see if they are interested and if they pursue it. So if you give them the chance to pursue it and maybe develop their career idea about that later on in time. So I always told my personal story. If I hadn't been exposed to C64 and all that stuff in early days, I probably would have not been so IT focused in my career. So I think this was a really cornerstone experience. And if we are able to reproduce these cornerstone experiences for kids, then I think we are good.
Yeah, I also have a question, or a view from my point of view. So I'm here, I can't program shit, yeah? So I'm the same age group as you are. We started off with an Amstrad PC directly, and that thing only had that turtle graphics basic on that, and I just was bored by that. But my point is, I'm totally with that, going for the programming 101, and I even find that extremely important to show the kids that programming does exist. And 10% will decide that programming is fun, and the other 90% will say programming is nothing for me. And for me, it's nothing for me to do that programming, but I now develop electronics where programs run on. Yeah, so you need that first-hand experience, but don't expect that all of those pupils will be interested in the programming. So that's
True.
something I wanted to say. And
yeah.
to the comment I heard about, yeah, it's not so important anymore to go low level, I would totally disagree. Everything that you are using is based on firmware, which is programming close to the hardware. And the guys are getting older and are going to retirement, and somebody needs to replace those gurus. Yeah?
Yeah.
So you need to give them those small boards that are now starting to grow and show them, look, you can have direct access to hardware. That's what I find so great about those little development test boards. So that you have both ideas going more abstract to programming, which is totally fine for me, but I cannot do it and don't want to do it, and have the other guys say, oh, I don't care about high level, I want to toggle that line. So that's two sides of that coin, but all starts with the first thing that you've shown, getting them to be able to touch it.
Exactly.
And that's what from the first row, the comment was, yeah, today you have that problem from the businesses. I would like to add also to that one. I find it extremely important to have those open systems, those, I don't dare to say, the open source and open hardware, because you can touch it there and nobody is preventing you. And I would say, yeah, the comment was correct. A company has no interest in showing you how to program stuff. They want you to get addicted. They want to entertain you and take your time. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for the comments. Can only reiterate, getting people early ages exposed to it to see if they get to it or not. So not everyone will get to it, obviously. I mean, there's no chance, and I don't proclaim that's reasonable at all. So give them a chance to see. If they're interested, let them pursue. That's all I say. The other stuff is getting in detail is contemporary all along. So if you take a look, I think IBM has just recently launched last year the Z14 series mainframes. Mainframes are dead since 30 years now, but they are still issuing new versions of it and selling them. So if you know COBOL and stuff like that, then you are all set for the future, because these people who learned it from early days on are not around for longer. So I support that view totally. Yeah. Well, thank you for the comment. Any further questions? Thanks for being here. Thank you for coming here, listening, and getting involved in the discussion. This really helps. And if you're interested, let me know. I will give voluntarily further updates on this topic. And if you have any interesting contacts, let me also know. Thank you for your time.